everybody, it's James Lindsay. You're listening to New Discourses Bullets, where I give a bullet point type summary of a single topic from the Woke Marxism movement that you need to understand in order to be able to comprehend what's happening around you and maybe fight back. I've been doing a little bit in the direction of operational issues lately, trying to talk about, not in such abstract terms, how the woke Marxist movement works, how it does what it does. And so in this episode, I want to cover a concept called operational preparation of the environment. This is a military term, as a matter of fact. It is the evolution of what is called operational preparation of the battlefield, or battle space, which more or less explains itself. If you want to be able to do an operation, you want to prepare the battle space or the battlefield to be able to do your operation. Well, in information, this is quite simple. You want to make sure your munitions are there. You want to make sure your troops are positioned. You want to make sure that if it were like in World War I, that you got your trenches dug, that you've got your things. You've got to prepare the space in order to do your battlefield operations, to make sure that your maneuvers are going to work, that your positioning is good, that you can set and spring traps, and so on. The update to that in an information war, which is sometimes called a fifth generation war, or in general, which we might call an unconventional war that we deal with now, is operational preparation of the environment. We've generalized from battlefield or battle space to environment. And the primary way that happens in an information war, like we find ourselves in at present, is through operational preparation of the narrative environment. And so it's control of the narratives. If we go and we look at, say, U.S. military documents, Army Command document, for example, talking about what operational preparation of the environment is, they give a very, vague definition, a very general definition. This is operational preparation of the environment is a series of activities that seek to enable future operations by allowing, we'll say, I'll kind of edit here, allowing the forces involved to enhance their situational awareness and understanding within an area of interest and improve operational responsiveness. And so what we're actually going to be dealing with in practice, for our purposes, dealing with woke Marxism and the kind of activism that they do, is operational preparation of the environment in terms of, like I said, narrative warfare. They're going to lay narratives that are going to be able to facilitate them achieving the various goals that they have, or in other words, that they're going to enable future operations for them in the language that we see from the United States military. And what that means is that they're going to prepare the public in terms of how they think about certain issues by framing those issues out ahead of time and making sure that the framing of those issues matches so that when certain things happen, or when certain things are made to happen, or a certain what they call active measure or mass line of action is taken, that it's going to follow the narrative track that's going to enable them to extract the maximum amount of value from that push, that mass line of action, or that particular active measure. These are all fancy terms, but what that boils down to is that they're going to start telling you ahead of time what they need to do. Here's a great example. I recently got in trouble for going on a huge stage with thousands of people in a live audience watching, tens or over maybe six figures of people in the virtual audience watching. And I said that the left is using drag queen story hour and these drag queen shows for children to try to provoke a drag Floyd event, meaning we think back to 2020, we think of how George Floyd died, the world blew up, and we have this summer of mostly peaceful protests, as they called it. In order to get that to have happened, you had to have operational preparation of the environment. What they had to do is Black Lives Matter started making major inroads as far back as 2014 and 15, and they started sowing the narrative. They preparing the American population as an environment, the narrative space, that there's a racism problem in police enforcement. And then they prepared the environment further by trolling and finding story after story after story, whether it's Breonna Taylor, whether it's Ahmaud Arbery, whether it's whichever other ones we're supposed to all say their names, and it didn't matter. And of course, Michael Brown from Ferguson in 2014, they are preparing the psychological domain of the American population to accept a narrative that there's a massive racism problem in policing in cities. And so that was operational preparation of the environment. And what they're doing now is the same thing with this provocation. Not only are they creating the heat by provoking for the drag Floyd kind of event, by putting not just drag queens in front of children, but the drag queens are increasingly provocative. They go from wearing relatively modest drag to quite gratuitous drag to sexual dancing to twerking to simulated sex acts to simulated nudity to, all kinds of who knows what. And it's an escalating provocation that seems to just get worse and worse and worse. That's preparing the environment by pouring heat into the environment. But at the same time, they're laying out narrative arcs all throughout the media, picked up across multiple countries. What are they saying? Well, there's this culture, this atmosphere of anti-LGBT slurs, rising anti-LGBTQ hate. These are the words that they're using frequently. There's stochastic terrorism is where, people say things and it causes somebody eventually to lose their mind and go do something. Our friend Libs of TikTok puts out these videos showcasing the drag queens in schools and in public, and they say, if anything happens, she agitated somebody by doing her reporting, she agitated somebody into showing up and causing a problem because she's a stochastic terrorist. So they're sowing in your mind the idea of stochastic terrorism, rising anti-LGBT hate, they're talking about how on Twitter, with Elon Musk having taken over especially, the anti-LGBTQ slurs, particularly the word groomer or the phrase okay groomer, has expanded in unprecedented levels in the past few months. They're showing example after example. Anytime there's anything that can be construed as a potential anti-LGBTQ whatever plus hate crime, it becomes like a big thing they pushed. We had the shooting that turned out to be by a non-binary and then it just vanishes. We have this councilman in New York City that apparently had graffiti put outside of his office or maybe inside of his office or whatever it was. And they drum it up and drum it up and drum it up. This is operational preparation of the environment so that if something stupid does happen, whether for real or because it was made to happen, then all of a sudden you have a prepared populace to accept that this is just part and parcel. It's just kind of an ugly exclamation point in a tide of rising anti-LGBT hate with a massive problem of social media being out of control that enables for stochastic terrorism to be the way that the right wing does its violence, blah, 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 justifying clampdowns, crackdowns, whether it's Apple and Google or Amazon servers or whatever dropping Twitter, whether it's the federal government getting involved in hate speech or whatever, with law enforcement, whether it's getting the FBI activated to go after everyday citizens who bring these things up. This is called operational preparation of the environment. You're not going to have a huge reaction that achieves a lot of intentional aims unless you've operationally prepared the environment. So we see it with George Floyd. We see it with what I'm calling a drag Floyd. They always are doing this. If they start pushing some weird narrative again and again and again, you can guess that they're probably doing operational preparation of the environment in order to pull off some kind of a mass line of action following some active measure. Okay, so what's another example? The trans phenomenon itself, the presence of the drag queen, we can just stay within that by starting out by pushing the idea of critical race theory and that your skin makes you complicit in evil. They prepare the psychological environment of the child to be doubtful about their identity. They sow doubt about the identity. Meanwhile, they start holding out the queer identities as somehow sacred or valuable or to be affirmed, and they do affirm them. This is an operational preparation of the environment to shake up kids in order to accept queer politics. And queer politics means queer theory infused politics, and it's a very radical Marxism that treats normalcy itself as a form of bourgeois property that must be abolished in order to have justice and a fair society. And so how are they going to get kids to accept this queer theory cult and its ideas? Well, operational preparation of the environment. You denigrate their skin color, you affirm and celebrate LGBTQ stuff, and you put them in this environment, and they become operationally prepared to accept the narratives of the cult. This is another, a little bit more abstruse example that's very concrete in what it does. Again, anytime you see them pushing some peculiar terms, stochastic terrorism was one, anti-LGBTQ hate was one, that the police were racist is one, say their names. Anytime you see them pushing something like this again and again and again and again and again, you can bet that there's probably operational preparation of the environment happening so that they are able to capitalize upon that later. How do you defeat that? Well, when you spot it and you can make a conclusive case that you're observing operational preparation of the environment, and you can make a solid guess as to what they're preparing to capitalize upon, you can actually desynchronize, as another formal term for it, you can desynchronize their active measure by very simply pointing out that this is what's happening and get that message to grow and get out there. Because once it grows and gets out there, it isn't going to stick. People are going to say, wait a minute, this is that thing people were warning about. This is, I thought they were crazy or conspiracy theorists at the time, but this is actually happening. And it desynchronizes their push so that they don't get the big spark of what they call reflexive activity when it lands. That's what caused George Floyd to blow up. It was reflexive is what they call it. So it's something that became more and more and more true. It became self-affirming, something everybody had to participate in, and it just took off. And that's what they need for a mass line of action to work. It has to become a reflexive moment where everything that we're thinking about, everything we're talking about points back to it, and that it actually kind of creates itself and thus its own operational success. So you can prevent that from taking off by desynchronizing the launch of the narrative, by pointing out that the narrative is already being set up well in advance. Since I've stuck in that domain, I'll remind you once again that rising anti-LGBTQ hate, lots of rising anti-LGBTQ hate speech or slurs, an environment where that's happening, and this term stochastic terrorism point us in a concrete example of one that's developing at the moment. These were all over COVID. They were all over basically every major push that we've seen from the woke Marxist regime in the past several years. And the better you get at spotting them, the less likely you are to get fooled by them. The current thing is almost always caught up in this. So the Ukraine conflict, same thing. There was active preparation of the environment, operational preparation of the environment. Then they launch a narrative arc in it, and then the narrative arc has to go. And now we're giving $100 billion to Zelensky or whatever else, while our own troops aren't getting any Christmas checks. So you get the idea. Operational preparation of the environment. When you learn to spot it, you can learn to put it together, see what they're going to do. You can see where the target is that they're shooting at, and you can desynchronize their operational battlefield so that it doesn't work. And that's how you can actually beat their narrative game over and over and over again. And the better you get at it, the faster you can do it, the less success they're going to have. And then their narratives don't take off reflexively, and we spare ourselves a lot of pain and a lot of advancement of their agenda.